In the wake of all these recent shootings, including Uvalde, it's even more important that we as a society destigmatize mental health and that we learn to have these real kitchen table conversations about how we're feeling and to normalize these kinds of topics. Today's guest is Erik DaRosa, and he is the founder and co host of the From Survivor to Thriver podcast, and he's here to upend mental health conversations. Join us to find out more.
Soul Nectar Show, the Soul Nectar Show. You're invited, delighted to discover who you are. Anything is possible if you believe. So join us on this beautiful journey. Soul Nectar Show, Soul Nectar Show.
Before we start this episode, I, Carrie Hummingbird,
And I, Akeem Sami.
want you to know that
You are invited
you're invited
to
join Soul Nectar Tribe.
If you like what you hear on Soul Nectar Show,
You will love being in person with us in Soul Nectar Tribe.
we invite you to check it out. First 30 days is free.
Right now, go to carriehummingbird.com, KERRI, hummingbird.com/membership, and sign up. We'll see you at our next tribe gathering. And now, on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Soul Nectar Show, that show where we talk about all things essence, where we gather around the campfire and we share our stories of connection to that which is bigger than us, to the great mystery beyond the veil, to those synchronistic moments that lead us inexorably towards a deeper understanding of who we are and why we're here on this planet. I'm your host, Carrie Hummingbird, and I love to have these conversations week after week, bringing you inspiration and a way forward through the madness that we experience in this earth existence, and hopefully a way and tools and inspirational stories to guide you through in your own life. And I'm personally really feeling so much on my heart. This year has been a challenging year mental health wise. We've had so many examples given to us of just the madness of our society. Just it's just peeling back the layers, and we're seeing just how crazy it in fact is. And I knew this years ago because they told me I was crazy for feeling things, and I needed to stop feeling things, and here's a pill, like stop feeling things. And I did that for a while, and then I was like, I can't do that anymore because I can't feel myself, and I don't think that's right. And I stopped taking those pills, and I was like, I'm just going to find another way. Sure enough, I got presented with a spiritual teacher, and then like more teachers and more teachers and more teachers, and eventually, I my world got turned right side up because I opened up to a higher level version of me. I opened up my I am presence into the I that's timeless, and I let that I guide me in my choices, and then my life started getting a lot better. And we're in this really just such a fascinating experience, having it made so clear to us that our level of consciousness as a nation in the United States, and I would argue any Western consciousness nation, is now facing the dark underbelly of our consciousness and the choices that we've made. And we're getting this opportunity to really ask ourselves, is this what we really want? Is this what we want? Is this who we want to be? Is this the part of the matrix we want to live in? I love the work by recently Power versus Force, Dr. David Hawkins, who talks about the vibrational scale of human consciousness, all the way from the lowest vibration, which is shame, all the way up to enlightenment. And he talks about that full range, and like that's the spectrum that we live in. And when we live in the lower vibrational states, we live in force. That's all the control stuff. That's that force energy. And when we live above courage, courage is the marker that turns us. Courage turns us from force into power. And for me, that power is love. That power is that unconditional love vibration that we can hold in our hearts and in our minds and in our lives. And so as we approach this interview today, I've brought a guest on that has a personal experience of shifting out of PTSD and this idea that he was, you know, unhelpable. This kind of that many of us get these ideas, and that it's like somehow it's not okay to be not okay, but maybe it is okay to be not okay. I mean, this stuff out there that's happening right now is not okay. And so how are we supposed to be okay when it's not okay? It's not okay. So what are we going to do? So today's guest is Erik DaRosa. I welcome you, Erik, to the show. Thank you for being here.
Hi, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me on. And as we talked about very quickly on the pre-show, I can't think of a more important yet or better time to be a guest on your show.
Yeah, it's like ideal. I mean, Erik is known by friends and clients as Yoda. So I'm already excited, and is an inspirational speaker and the founder and co-host of the From Survivor to Thriver podcast. And is upending the front end of mental health conversations along with his co-host Mark Fernandez. And every week they tackle different mental health topics through honest and relatable kitchen table conversations with real people who are helping to shatter the mental health stigmas and find their voices. He aims to normalize discussions around mental health topics and remind his audience that they are not alone, that there's strength in community, and that it's okay to not always be okay, because some of this stuff is really messed up. So, Erik traded in a successful career as a New York City finance executive when he moved to Colorado with his wife and two cats, and he hasn't looked back since. And he also spends winters as a ski instructor and sits on the board of Sacred Cycle, a Colorado based nonprofit whose mission is to empower survivors of sexual trauma through mountain biking and community. And he's born and raised in New England. And, I also I wasn't born in New England. I was born in Texas, but I was raised in New England. So we have that in common. We have that New England thing. Yeah. So I'm excited to have you on the show, Erik. We were talking before we started the broadcast about some of the tragedies that have been happening. 27 school shootings as of this broadcast in 2022 alone. That's insane. And this is the world we're living in the United States, and it's heartbreaking. And, I wonder what wisdom you have to offer us about how to overcome like all this PTSD.
Sure. Well, thank you again for having me. And I want to say, I know you live in Texas, and my deepest condolences for what's happening there right now. And uh, when I said I couldn't have picked a better time to come on your show, I feel like right now with everything that's happening, it's such a pivotal moment for us as a society, but also for those of us who are either advocates for or who are, and I count myself in both of these categories. I am part of the mental health community, right? So you had mentioned PTSD, and we can get to that in a few moments. But one of the things I found, and Mark and I were recording our own podcast episode this morning with a guest, and we found ourselves having the very same conversation around what's happening in the state of our country, but also globally, and this debate that's going on. And one of the things he and I have been working so hard on in the past 18 months with our show and with From Survivor to Thriver is looking and helping to destigmatize mental health conversations and destigmatize the whole issue of mental health. And what I've really seen in the past week, especially since the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, is suddenly people re-stigmatizing and people blaming mental health and mental illness for these terrible tragedies and terrible mass shootings. but also saying, we need more funding and we need more resources and more accessibility. And one of the things I found myself doing recently is really saying, well, why can't we hold two thoughts and two discussions at the same time? It's extremely important, and we must continue to fund mental health, and we must make it more accessible to everybody, right? Full stop. No debate about that. But why can't we also at the same time hold space for a second thought, which is, well, maybe there's another issue going on, right? If we look around the developed world, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Canada, other countries like the United States, where the mental health statistics are almost exactly the same. We don't see people wielding guns, mass shootings, killing children in their schools. And so, to me, right, there's something else unique going on in this country that isn't happening around the rest of the world. And you and I were talking about it a little bit at the beginning of the show, and it's this whole issue around gun safety. And I've also found myself and my wife, as we talked about this a lot, maybe the conversation needs to be about both mental health, but at the same time, rather than saying let's take away guns or let's control guns, right? Because I think that's where a lot of people get very defensive around the issue. If we talk about something in terms of safety, I think that's something that everybody can get on board with. And so I found myself having these two thoughts now at the same time. Let's talk about gun safety, and let's talk about the importance of funding and making accessible mental health care in this country.
I so resonate with this idea of gun safety. Um, I'm not a proponent of guns. I'll say that's not my perspective. And I also know that I don't have the only perspective. So there's, 8 billion perspectives on the planet. I have one of them. My perspective is that when the consciousness is elevated to love, that guns won't even be a question anymore. That's just not a choice that will be on the spectrum when we have a love-based consciousness. We have a fear-based consciousness very clearly. We are in the force part of the spectrum. We are in the fear-based part of the spectrum. And as a large, like, that is what leads. That is what has most of the energy, right now. And so you asked the question of what makes us different. And I was thinking about this morning because I was like, I think what makes us different is that, we have looser controls over guns, and we have less structure for our youth. So those two things together, you know, I remember, I mean, okay, I'm one of those people that was diagnosed, right, with a one of those diagnoses that you don't want to have,
That's right.
right? It made me a dangerous person to be around or something like that. Well,
It's
I
yeah.
I know what it feels like to have impulses that you don't have the power to restrain.
Yep. And it's interesting. So you're just talking about diagnoses, and one of the things I celebrate my diagnosis. I celebrate the fact that I've been diagnosed with PTSD, and I gave a talk last Monday to high school district across the country in New Hampshire. And one of the things I talked about was being diagnosed with PTSD and how those four letters changed my life. For so long, I was living in a world of anxiety, OCD, so the physical manifestations of OCD, the counting, the neatness, what people, traditionally think OCD to be. But I also suffered with the intrusive thought side of OCD, which to me was very terrifying, and it felt extremely real. And so those two pieces helped lead to the anxiety spiral. And for so very long, it was always, I was being treated for the symptoms, but not the root cause. And I've listened to several of your episodes, and one of the things that really resonates with me is this theme I've heard about, one, healing trauma, but also healing the inner child. And so for me, once I was given that PTSD diagnosis, which was only 6 months ago, so here I am, I'm 50. I finally have something that I can grab onto and say, yes, this is something that I have. It's not who I am. It does not define me, but it's something that I have, and it is treatable. And so once I sort of got that diagnosis, I was able to start working on my inner child. I was able to start looking at my past childhood traumas. I was, for the first time, actually able to look at, I lived in New York City on September 11th, 2001. And really, until I started to do all of this trauma work, I had no idea that the impact that 9/11 had on me, not only on that day, but for the remaining 10 years that I lived in New York City, and for the 11 years, since then, since my wife and I have moved to Colorado. And so, you're just getting the diagnosis of PTSD has unlocked so much for me, and has allowed me to start to look at myself in a much different way.
Oh gosh, I love that you brought that up because that's exactly what I'm talking about. It's kind of like in the fishbowl of New York City, there was this hugely traumatic event that sent a wave of fear around the whole planet, and just despair and grief and horror, and here you were in the heart of that sort of event, and that cataclysmic event, and you're receiving in daily basis, daily doses of that fear saturating your consciousness.
Absolutely. And when I now talk through it with my therapist, I was already living in a world, let's call it the fight or flight world, right? Anxiety, OCD, always looking for physical manifestations of control over my intrusive thoughts, and then constantly worrying about those intrusive thoughts. When would they come back? How would they manifest themselves? And so I was already battling with that through my high school, through my middle school years, my high school years, my college years, into my grad school, and into my time in New York City. Then layered on top of that suddenly is 9/11. And so it took what was already an overworked fight or flight part of my brain, and just completely and totally elevated it. And my wife and I now talk about how there are things in our daily lives when we were living in the city that we didn't even realize that we were concerned about, behaviors that we changed. And so as I went through two dissociative episodes, psychotic breaks, nervous breakdowns, however we want to define those now, the first being in 2004 and the second being in 2006, it's become even clearer to me that it was a combination of both the PTSD from the childhood trauma, the emotional trauma that I had been subjected to, but it was also the PTSD of living in New York City on a day, which, I can sit here right now and I can put myself exactly back into the spot where I was sitting, what it looked like outside, what the temperature that day, and then how it was like a light switch got thrown on, and the entire city was transformed in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that is, whew, it's, you cannot underestimate the impact of the long-term impact on the psychology of any person connected with that event, and then rippling out. So you're kind of at the epicenter, and then the influence of that spreads, right? It's like a bomb went off, and like a bomb of fear, and like it just spreads out. And so I was affected by it all the way in California. I could feel the surge of energy all the way in California.
Well, it's
I
interesting.
mean,
Yeah, and for the longest time, and I'm glad we're talking about this, because whenever events like what happened in Buffalo, what just happened in, Uvalde, Texas, what happened in Sandy Hook, or now I live in Colorado, but I wasn't here at the time, Columbine. And so whenever these events happen, I immediately, am brought back to being in my office, 8:50, 8:40 something in the morning on September 11th. And, and all of the feels and how my world kind of changed that day. Well, but for the longest time, when I would have conversations about 9/11, I would find that I was very separated from it. And when I would hear people talk about 9/11 who weren't in New York City, and I would just have that conversation, it would take me some time to actually remember that I was actually there. And I think part of it has been, 11 years now outside of New York City, and Colorado has very much become our home. But I think for so long I tried to block out the memory of that day, and then the years that followed after that. That I really started to look at myself from the outsider perspective. Just like my friends who weren't there, you were saying you were in California. I've heard a lot of stories about people who are watching morning shows that day and they suddenly cut in. And so I started to feel as though I was one of those people until it happened to come up in a conversation with my therapist about 2 months ago. And we were just talking about traveling. And I was talking about how, when I left New York City, I didn't feel like I left New York City at peace. I felt like there was, a very strong, I don't want to use the word hate, but I didn't leave New York City on good terms with the feelings that I wanted to, and I was looking for a way to be able to go back there to kind of put some of those pieces together and put it to rest. And in the course of that conversation, I said, "Oh yeah, and by the way, I was, thinking about 9/11, and boom, kind of everything came out." And she said, "Yes, it's you can have PTSD on multiple levels," which for me, just hearing PTSD for the first time 6 months ago, I thought, I can't possibly have PTSD. I wasn't in a war. I didn't serve in the military. And so we had a long education on what PTSD really is. And then we had this secondary conversation that, yes, you can have layered PTSD, and there could be PTSD related to different pieces and parts of your life. So it's been a very fluid journey for me over the decades, but I will say the last 6 months have been this, tremendous awakening for me in terms of really discovering who I am. And as you said at the beginning of this show, that, I've moved through it. I was deep in it for a very long time, and I've moved through it, and I've embraced it. And now through the podcast and through the other work that I do, it's all about, helping others. And I want others to know that they're not alone on their journeys and that they can overcome it as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, I feel like these, well, I mean, I believe that everything has purpose. I mean, I believe that this is soul school, and that everything that's happening is for us, for our improvement somehow, our edification, our experience, our soul mastery. And, that is a difficult pill to swallow when you first swallow that pill. But then once you've swallowed it, you go, okay, how is this for me? And you could see how, what a lesson these things are for us in humanity about how we want to show up in our with ourselves and in our lives, and just also the exploration of our consciousness, like you were talking about. Like, I mean, would you ever even think to explore your inner consciousness and your inner child if you hadn't had some experience like this? I mean, it wouldn't probably even occur to you to go back and check inside and get to know your inner child.
No, not at all. It's something that had never crossed my mind. So if we back up in terms of when I first started therapy, I was 34 years old, 33, 34 years old. I was living in New York. I had my first dissociative episode. And so prior to that time, I can think back to when I was 7, and that's when my first real conscious thoughts of intrusive thoughts and the physical feelings of anxiety took place, I had seen a child psychologist one or two times. My mother had brought me to him, but there was really no further follow-up work that was done. And so in my 30s, as I was working with my psychiatrist and we were talking through issues, we were really talking to what OCD was, what anxiety was, why I was feeling those things. But we never really had an opportunity to drill down deeply like I have, in the past 6 months into this whole inner child and trauma work. And what's been really cool is my therapist here in Colorado, we've actually named my inner child Little Erik. And so we're very, very conscious about me doing things to, give little Erik safety and security, and show him that, the world is a fun and joyful place, and that big Erik is in a place of safety and security and joy. And it's my opportunity now to kind of give back to him things that he never had a chance to have in his childhood. And I'm recognizing now how much that's healed me as an adult, and how much and for how long that was kind of the root cause of what was holding me back and creating so many of these issues for me in my my college years, in my 20s and my 30s, and even into my 40s.
Yeah, when you kind of broach this territory, it's miraculous and it's fascinating. And it's also really, for me, illuminating about how, I don't know, just how complex, but also, fragile is not the right word, but highly impacted our consciousness can be, from even small things. I mean, some people have PTSD off of, relatively small things. Other people, it takes big things, right? So it's a spectrum, and you can't really say like somebody shouldn't be experiencing that. They're experiencing what they're experiencing. Something landed in their brain, and it made some impact that we don't understand, and then that changed everything. It started, causing these symptoms and experiences. So I feel like there's so much we don't know about human consciousness, even still, that it's sort of like we need to slow way down. Like, I
Yeah,
feel
we
like we
we
need to
do.
slow it way down. And
Way down. We had a conversation this morning on our show, and we were talking, as I had mentioned, we were talking about the events that were taking place, and then we were delving into our guests particular background and grief that she had gone through, and that exact same thing came up about we really need to slow things down. And this is, I feel like, what's happening in our society right now. COVID, here we are, mid 2022. We're People are still dealing with both the physical symptoms of COVID and all the variants, but with COVID anxiety. So there's a really big trauma event that's been occurring globally now for well over 2 years. And then we have, the mass shootings, and then we have an unprovoked war taking place between, Russia and the Ukraine, right? And so we're constantly now getting bombarded by news of these events, whether it's social media, traditional print media channels, or even just kind of having conversations around the dinner table. These things are coming up, and rather than taking some time, as one of my friends likes to say, to sit with it and just think about it, we're all so quick to want to come up with a solution and rush to an answer. And as you said, I think that's one of the things that we really need to do at this present moment, is we need to sit with it, and we need to see, what does it feel like for me? I've talked a lot recently about, meeting me, or meeting yourself where you're at. We're all so good now at adjusting and trying to meet other people where they're at, but I think this is one of those times where we need to meet ourselves where we're at, and take some time to reflect on how all of these events happening both here in the US and globally are impacting us, how it's impacting our mental health, and how it's impacting those around us.
Yeah, and what's the opportunity? I like to also ask that question. It's like, because I see these, I don't know, in my own life, the stress and the down dive and the darkness was a doorway. It was an opening for me to see life through a whole new lens and to live my life from a whole different structure, a whole different foundation. And, granted, it's taken about 10 years, since I made that decision and it to actually arrive with a foundation of love. And it's taken a while because why? Because the complexity of the subconscious, like to go in there to have awareness, it's like we need to slow it down so we can witness, right? Because if we're moving so fast, we can't even witness it. And it's like, and then the realization that everything is that I'm witnessing is part of me somehow. So, for example, when I heard about the shooting and I, heard my mom talk about it and she told me how she felt and I felt I mean, she feels it. She feels everything. She always has. That's just that just cracks your heart open right there because that's connecting that's connecting me with my mom. Like that's the impact it had on us. And we're not even in that town. I don't even know anybody in that town. But that it's affecting all of us because it's like we're all connected. I mean, we want to say that we're separate, but we're not. It's like the mushrooms and mycelium networks in the ground. They connect to everything else. Like the trees, and when they go down and they have their roots, they're connected in with the soil and that's connected with everything else. Humanity is all connected with each other, but we're just trying to deny it. And that's what's getting us in trouble, I think, is like this idea of being separate.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. We are all totally connected, and I would I want to think that everybody's first reaction upon hearing that news was a deep sense of sadness, right? And I think one of the things that's been happening as these events have been taking place is it's happening now with so much regularity that people are no longer shocked by it. They're no longer surprised by it. I think some people are also finding it difficult to, you know, to carry that same level of sadness every time it takes place. So it's almost like being a little bit numb to it. And so we're not giving ourselves the opportunity to really move through the grieving phase collectively as a society, right? Being so closely, connected to one another. And I think what's happening is so many people are getting stuck and caught at the anger phase. And so as the anger comes, rather than processing it and trying to move through that, they're stopping at anger and they're quickly reacting. And so we've got people on both sides of the spectrum who are very quick to respond with talking points even before in some instances the event has come to a close. And I'm just looking at this last one in Texas, within 48 hours how it unfolded, the facts around it completely and totally changed from what we first heard, right, when the news broke. And so because we're very connected like that, I think as some people respond in an angry way, other people shut down and close down and get very defensive. And so you're absolutely right. Because we're so connected, we need to take that time as a society to sit, and we need to talk to one another, but we also need to listen to one another. And we need to be more willing to listen to other people's points of view, and not judge each other so harshly as we're so apt to do in today's society, whether it's over a keyboard, a phone call, or a text.
Yeah, I I know that very well because I spent a good part of my life being in that judgment and that quick reaction, right? And
Yep.
but what I've learned is that if you give something some space and you open your heart to it and sort of like that old adage of like imagine put yourself in that other person's shoes and try that on, you realize things with some space and contemplation. And one of the things I realized and is that everybody, it's not out there, it's in here, right? You were talking about your inner child. Like it's not in the past, it's not done. It's still in you. It's in you now. Your experience in New York City, that is still there. It's part of this matrix that is formed part of your consciousness, so it's part of you. Everything we hear and see on the internet, everything we take into our consciousness, that's all part of us. And even what we feel and perceive without even knowing that we're connected to it, we feel and perceive it. I mean, there's been lots of people I know that are very empathetic and sensitive who have been really going through a lot of hard times this spring, and just like having needing lots of downtime to cry, to grieve, to process. And my invitation is that I think if more people were embracing this kind of work, if more people were letting themselves actually open their hearts and feel what they're feeling, I think there would be we might be able to clear the pH of the fish tank a little bit.
Yeah, and
It's like,
I
I
love
mean,
that. I love how you talk about, yeah, the pH of the fish tank. Every once in a while, the fish has to be taken out, right? And you have to clean the tank, and then you have to put some fresh water in, and fish goes in, and it's the same thing with what's going on, around us. And I also think we need to welcome this idea of vulnerability as well. And it's something that I love to talk about on our show. I love to talk about it just in general with my friends and other people. It's vulnerability is a strength. And when we go through some of these really difficult experiences, whether we go through them individually with, for me it was, coming to terms with my trauma and working through that, or if we go through a collective trauma like we have been on a kind of a global scale now over the past couple of years, it's important to be able to reach out to people and to be vulnerable and to show what our true feelings and emotions are, and to have those difficult conversations, and to be able to say openly and honestly, hey, I'm not okay today. And knowing that you're saying that to somebody who isn't going to pass any kind of a judgment, but they're just going to be there to lend, a helpful ear, and they're willing to listen. And oftentimes that's a very big first step in us getting to feel and differently, and feeling like we're taking the steps to be able to move through it, as opposed to kind of putting that facade up, and putting all the defense mechanisms up and saying, I'm fine, this isn't impacting me. And then somewhere down the line, as that builds and builds and builds, like that 2 liters bottle of soda that gets shaken up, and suddenly you twist the cap a little bit and the whole bottle explodes. And so I think we all need to be more aware of ourselves being vulnerable and opening ourselves up to other people, so that we can both share our own traumas and be willing to hear what other people are experiencing, and together we can grow as a society by both listening and experiencing those things together.
yeah, hearing each other's perspectives, and then, right, slowing down long enough to notice that you have some repressed feelings that you need to actually feel, and process and be with. It's I've slowed down a lot this spring, and as everybody else has sped up, I slowed down. And it gave me the opportunity to really feel like the nuances and just the refinements of things, and like place myself in that position. When I think about, a lot of people might condemn the boy, right? Like condemning him for what he did, or condemn his mother, or condemn his grandparents, or somebody, somebody's got to be to blame, right?
Mhm.
And but the thing is, sometimes when you're a mom, you're doing your best, and the child is still having problems, is still experiencing a silent struggle, and that silent struggle I feel is pervasive in the youth, especially the masculine youth at this time, this like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 year olds. They're like, it's almost like there's so many of them that it's hard for them to speak what's actually going on. Maybe they don't even have the words to speak it, but it's like this rage. It's like this inner turmoil. And like what you were talking about, like the intrusive voices and things like that. I feel like there's just a whole wave of that going on. And, I don't think kids know how to process that. And if we don't give them the tools, they're not going to know how to process that. I think the only thing that's really helped my son who's gone through some of this is that I was there, is that I have all this, that I've done all this work on myself, that I've gone deep diving into my consciousness, that I spent all this money and time learning about energy healing and you know shielding my energies and all of clearing negative thoughts and energies, like all of this stuff that I've learned. There's so much I've learned. I pass it along, but not everybody has had the time or the understanding that they could claim those tools for themselves, right? So if they don't have the tools, how are they supposed to get through it? It's not an
Exactly.
easy experience.
No, it's an extremely difficult experience. I think back to when I was 18. I was in my sophomore year, freshman into my sophomore year in college. I had no idea that there were other people out there just like me. I thought that what I was suffering from was something unique, and if I dared speak about it, people would either think, and I'm going to use air quotes here for your listening audience, they would think I was crazy. I thought somebody's going to put me in handcuffs. Like I can never allow anybody to hear what's going on in my head, and I better make sure that nobody ever gets this visual image of me not looking like I'm completely and totally put together at all times. And you brought up what's, I think, just as important is not only allowing space for those of us who are experiencing it to be able to speak, but for those around those who are experiencing it to
It's
be
a
able to
lot.
speak. It's a lot, and it's a two-way street, and it's a two-way conversation. And I only wish that I had had the ability to do that when I was younger, like your son has, because I would have been in a much different place much sooner in my life. But as I look back on it now, I went through it so that I have a story to tell, so that other people may not have to go through it in the same way, and I can share that experience. But my hope is, as more and more people begin to speak openly about this, and as more parents are armed with some of those tools to be able to see from the outside, hey, something doesn't look right, even if my child isn't speaking to me about it, that they feel comfortable enough having those difficult conversations, that more and more people will begin to look at this whole topic of mental health in the same way that they look at physical health. Annual physical, go to the doctor if you blow out your knee skiing, and I'm going to my therapist tomorrow, and I'll meet you for coffee when I'm done at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, and and I want to say, like, for the all the the parents, like, pay attention to your intuition. Like, if your intuition is just dinging you, ding, like, bing 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 bing, like, don't ignore that. Slow down. Like, slow down. Listen to it, breathe, lean in and have that uncomfortable conversation. Really open it up without judgment. Like, it's okay. Tell me what's going on. I'm totally open to hearing what your reality is, what you're experiencing right now. And the thing is not to react to it or not judge it, because um, it can be scary, to be someone's mother and have them tell you some of these things. But also, what I've noticed, honestly, Eric, is like what part of what I had to go through was like this you know the this narcissistic mother thing, like they're like the wanting to be the perfect mother, and like you don't want your child to have any problems, and you just want to put a good face on for the world, like everything's fine. It's like you're part of the problem too, because just be humble. Like, we're all humans, we're all in a journey. It's not, it's a messy journey. Embrace the mess, lean into the mess. It's not a problem that it's happening. It's an opening, it's a doorway, it's a portal to something that with far greater potential. And if you embrace it that way, it becomes, everybody can embrace it. It becomes,
Yes.
it's open now.
Yeah, and one way that I've started talking about it that I think gives some people better perspective is, 1 out of 5 people in the United States suffers from some type of mental illness, but 5 out of 5 people in the United States don't have it totally together all the time. And
Yeah.
I think we need to remind ourselves of that it doesn't have to be, out of the DSM manual, and you don't have to be clinically diagnosed with some type of a mental illness. That we're all going to have days that might not be so okay, and we need to be willing to acknowledge that, whether we're a parent, whether we're a student, whether we're a kid, whether we're a grandparent, whoever it is. We need to raise our hands and say, hey, I'm not having such a great day today. Can I talk to you about it? And know that you can have that conversation, and the person on the other side is going to say, wow, you know what, the other day I was going through something just like that, and here's what I did, and here's how I went about helping myself to feel better. That's the kind of world that I want to see us move toward. I think we're still a very long way away from that, as some of these conversations I've seen in the past week have demonstrated. But I'm not going to stop working toward it, and that's kind of my goal, and the hill that I'm going to die on is I want to make this conversation a kitchen table conversation that we can have, just like people talk about sex and how taboo that was 30 or 40 years ago, not having that conversation, and now everyone's having it at the dinner table, and smoking cigarettes, or I'm in Colorado, so the whole idea of marijuana has been out and open for so long now. Those conversations are taking place at dinner tables everywhere around the country on a nightly basis. Those same conversations around mental health should be taking place at dinner tables around this country on a nightly basis as well.
Well, and I want to add to that conversation just a little bit. Yes. And what really needs to happen is that every single person needs to claim responsibility for the state of the consciousness that produces these events. Because it's not just, as a person who is a healer, and a person that woke up sooner, I've noticed that a lot of people in that role, they end up getting scapegoated, like as if they're the problem, just because they're cracking at the seams and showing you there's a problem. That I want to reverse that. Like it's not. It's like they're just the early warning system. Like that person is just telling you, hey, this thing is going on for everybody, and I'm just your early warning system because I'm sensitive and I can't hold it all together the way you do. But this is happening for you too. Like this is what's going on inside of you, even if you're not aware of it. And and this is a problem in our society. So like just see people that are actually actively talking about this, and or even the person that's actually actively having an issue with it, like they're the roosters, they're the early warning system, that's all.
Oh, totally.
I mean,
And I, my latest iteration of my journey, I've done a lot of work on the eastern side, and this is exciting. It's the first time I'm going to actually talk about and mention this in a public space, but it's been floating around in my head for about a week now, and it was based on a conversation I had with somebody last week. And it's this idea of what I call my healing triangle, and for me, I call it my equilateral healing triangle, because it's based in a foundation of traditional Western talk therapy, medication, cognitive behavioral therapy, psychiatry, right? So I have that one piece. I also have this other piece on the eastern side with my energy healer, and it's Reiki and mindfulness and meditation. But the third piece that I'm really starting to recognize is equally important is this whole idea of nature healing and being outdoors and all the things that I do, skiing and mountain biking, and how that has really helped create a foundation. And so I can kind of take this equilateral triangle of healing, and I can kind of flip it on any of its sides, and there's still a solid foundation no matter what side I flip it on. But at the same time, if I remove one of those corners, the whole triangle comes apart. And so it's exactly what you were saying. For me, people who are in the healing space are so very important. It's given me so much. In my energy healer has given me so much insight into what energy means to me, and how what's happening both within me and around me impacts my life, and it's made it so much easier to then be able to talk about it with my Western therapist. And it's been so much easier to then go out and do all these amazing activities in nature, and be able to ground myself and understand why I'm feeling the way I am at certain pieces and points in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love nature. That's why I teach earth-based spirituality because it's healing. It's very healing to be outside, and I think everybody can experience that. I mean, without any training whatsoever, you can just walk outside barefoot and get some healing. So
Oh,
it's the
absolutely.
easiest kind of healing there is. Hug a tree. I mean,
Well, yeah, and that's the thing. It's not some to me, it's not some magic like
no.
elixir or pill, right? Walk outside barefoot on the grass, like close your eyes, right? Kind of feel the grass under you. Go for a walk with a friend. It doesn't have to be something. And for so very long in my life, and I've now realized that it was distractions for me. I always did everything 0 to 100. So if I was going to ski, well, I had to ski all day, every day for the entire ski season. I couldn't allow myself to take a break or let my body relax because, hey, it's skiing and that's what makes me feel good. Mountain biking, same thing. Like even on days when I wasn't feeling, my body wasn't feeling it, I still went out there and forced myself to do it. And I've recognized that dial can go from 0 to 20 or 0 to 10 or
It's
0 to 30. And if I don't
an
feel like doing
adjustable dial.
exactly. And if I don't feel like doing one thing on a particular day, well, maybe I'll sit down and I'll journal for 30 minutes. And that gives me the exact same, release as if I went out and rode my bike for 3 hours. That's what I needed in that particular day. And that's coming back to that idea that I mentioned earlier, which is meeting yourself where you're at on any particular point in time, on any particular day. Because it is going to change constantly throughout the day, throughout the year, throughout however long.
Yeah, what you're describing is from the four agreements. They call it do your best. And doing your best means being present with where you are in the moment and adjusting accordingly, right? Do your best. Yeah,
Yep. And
that's
that's all
beautiful.
I think, that's all many of us are trying to do right now. We're just trying to do our best and trying to be the best versions of ourselves, right? At this present time. I'm a better version of myself now than I was 6 months ago. In 2 years from now, I can come back on this show and I'll probably say I'm a far better version of myself than I am right now. And it's that willingness to embrace it. It's that willingness to look at inward at ourselves, at what we need to do to make ourselves, feel better. And we really have to be willing to be vulnerable, and to admit that the journey itself, I always used to talk about it as being nonlinear. And I hear nonlinear being used so much now. I like to think of it more, my element is water. And so I like to think of it as fluid. It's that journey is ever changing. It's like a river. And rivers, they've been here a lot longer than we have and will continue to be here a lot longer than our physical bodies will be here. And so I look at those journeys now as these fluid flowing rivers.
Yes, the river of life, so to speak.
Yes.
Excellent. So, well, beautiful. So, I thank you for sharing all that. That's gorgeous. I love the metaphors. I love the visuals. And I think the way that people are going to find you is your podcast, right? I'm going to put a link to your podcast, your Surviving to Thriving.
Yes. Yeah. So people can find our podcast is called From Survivor to Thriver. We have episodes come out every Tuesday morning. We're on Apple and Spotify and all the major players. We also have a Facebook page, From Survivor to Thriver. And so you can go there. You can see both the videos. We have teaser clips. We put up interesting articles and some stream of consciousness thoughts throughout the week. We really have tried to make that page an active community page for people to get as much from it as they want to contribute to it. You can also find me. I'm on Facebook under my name, Erik DaRosa, DaRosa, and on Instagram, my handle is at Ski Sherpa, SKISHERPA, and there you'll find an interesting and fun mix of my mental health journey, what we're doing on the show, but also what I'm doing on the snow in the wintertime and what I'm doing on the mountain bike in the summertime.
Fantastic. Well, I will put all of that in the show notes, and thank you so much for contributing your wisdom there. Okay, everybody, so if you thought this episode was helpful, please share it out, like and subscribe and all the good stuff. And that's how we keep it flowing and the wisdom flowing, and somebody might find it, like just bam, because you shared it. Okay, we're going to give kisses. You want to help me give kisses, everybody, Erik? Here they come.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, here they come. We love you.
Love you.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you
Thanks
next
so
time.
much.
Bye for now, everyone. If you found even one gold nugget in this episode of Soul Nectar Show, will you do us a favor? Will you subscribe, like, and share this episode? Maybe even write a comment and let us know what you thought about it. We really, really want to engage with you at a much deeper level. Let's be part of community together. Have a great week, everyone. Bye for now. To dive in deeper to nourishing conversation, visit soulnectar.show.
Soul Nectar Show. Awaken away to show. Take a sip from the drip of nectar from the source of who you are.